forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger 10. Here's Steve Dace.
And greetings. It is one of the best shows of the year because it means the most wonderful time of the year is nigh. I am Steve Dace alongside my co-host, but never partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. Brother, you know what time it is. It is college football season. Big 12 Media Days are going on to kick it off, just as you and I are taping this. SEC is next week. The Big 10 is 2 weeks from today. We are, about 3 weeks until fall camps open around the Big 10. Northwestern and Nebraska might be opening up here in a couple days, given when they start playing.
Raiders, I think, are going to be the first NFL team to report, I think, on Sunday.
Because they're in the preseason game this year, or the Hall of Fame game, I mean. Yeah, so it is nearly the most wonderful time of the year. 1 year from today, the next EA Sports college football game will be released. Can you dig it? How you feeling, man?
I hope I can dig it. I mean, it sounds like they're putting in some insane levels of detail into this game.
If at the end of a game at Kinnick, in the end of the first quarter, you turn and wave at the University Children's Hospital, I'm going to pee my pants.
Yeah,
okay?
no, I've bitched to you before about the mechanics of Madden versus NCAA football 14. Like, I can't throw receivers open. If the level of detail is like that, it's got the mechanics of Madden, I'm still probably going to end up getting a PS5. But yeah, it is the most wonderful time of the year. Yesterday, we've got some other stuff going on next week. We're not going to have episodes of Michigan Podcast or Bigger 10. And I was like, man, we need to get like Brett Ciancia from Pick Six Previews on, because we really, we got to keep building momentum towards the season. Because mentally, I am like 2 weeks away for like the season starting.
You're there
next month, and I realized no, we still have all of August.
Yes, pace yourself. But yes, that's Aaron talking about the thrill going up his leg. Yeah, indeed. So we debuted part one of my annual college football preview on right here on the channel on Michigan Podcast yesterday. We went through my crystal ball predictions. So you didn't get a chance to comment on those. You have any quick thoughts before we get into part two that we're going to be breaking down here on this week's episode of Bigger 10?
Obviously, as a Chiefs fan, and basically the most bold prediction you had was number 7 of Ryan Day leaving Ohio State at the end of this season to take the head coaching job at Kansas City. It's something I've thought about too, not necessarily Ryan Day specifically, but Andy Reid getting older, not getting around particularly well either. I saw a replay. Yeah, I think it was the 2014 wild card game, between the Colts and the Chiefs, the first season that he was coaching there, and he looks a lot younger. So all that is to say, he's getting older. I don't know how much longer he wants to do this. I think he's got just about all the resume, as you pointed out as well, to get into the Hall of Fame. So that was one. Otherwise, I'm curious of one thing, and I'm not trying to pull your pants down live on the air. And but. So you've got, just to give something away here, you've got Iowa at 8-4, right? Mm-hmm. But you did not have them in the cell teams that will be lose at least 2 more games than they did last season.
Correct.
Can you explain that?
Because
you just went with the most likely?
I went with the most likely. Yeah. I know Iowa is going to win, although they won 10 last year, but pretty much 7-9 every year. Yeah. No matter what the personnel on the roster is, right?
It's true.
And last year they had a very favorable schedule. This year they don't have a very favorable schedule, actually. So I know it's going to be somewhere between 7 and 9, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was 7, and I wouldn't be shocked if it was 9. Yeah, that's why.
I got you. One other Iowa note as well. I know I mentioned this to you too off the air.
Right.
No Kirk Ferentz prediction this year.
This is the first time in several years I've not predicted this to be Kirk Ferentz's last year. And you know why? It's because I don't think, unless they have an offensive renaissance this year, I don't think they are in a position to hand this thing off to Brian Ferentz, which is what I think him and Gary Barta would like to do. And I have no idea who Gary Barta would actually hire in a coaching search, because I'm not sure Gary Barta has any idea whom he would hire in a coaching search.
And I don't either. I really don't.
Gary would love if Iowa was 9-3, 10-2, Kirk retired, and the offense averaged 400 yards a game, and just keep writing Ferentz on the paycheck line, just to change the first name. He would love for that to occur, right? The idea, you're an Iowa fan. If I put the phrase Gary Barta national search together, your thoughts are what?
Gird your loins.
Indeed. Yes. I mean, there are big-time schools that are having hard times sometimes these days, landing great coaches with a national search. It's a competitive market out there. No question about it. Your thoughts on, this will get revealed here in a minute, but your thoughts on the fact that I have the entire, in fact, let's leave that and get to issue 1. Let's do that, because that'll spoil where we're going. Let's start with my college football preview. This is what I project the final college football top 25 playoff rankings will be for the committee's final ranking, the first Saturday in December, or first Sunday in December, after all the conference championship games. This is what I believe the playoff committee will give us for the final top 25. And you can see right away, and this was in yesterday's crystal ball, I am predicting something that has never occurred before in the history of the playoff. I am predicting that all 4 bids come from 2 conferences, from the Big Ten and from the SEC, and that the other 3 conferences, Power 5 conferences, and of course the Group of 5 out of Cincinnati like last year as an outlier, are completely frozen out this year. And by the way, this extends to my Heisman prediction in my crystal ball yesterday. I predicted that all 4 finalists for the Heisman Trophy would all be from Alabama and Ohio State. 2 from Alabama and 2 from Ohio State. So let's take a look at the rankings there, Aaron, and provide us your thoughts. Again, this is how I believe the regular season will finish, the first week of December.
Yeah, I can see this happening. There's no glaring oversights, I guess I should say, or no way that could happen. I don't know, though, Steve. I really don't know. ESPN, as we've talked about, the dynamic there, and they all but control the college football playoff ranking system. You have to believe it's either going to be Michigan or Ohio State. There's going to be an all-out air assault. These guys are phonies. They're fakes. Put Clemson, who conveniently the ACC network is on ESPN, put them in over one of these guys. I think the political aspect of this and the
I get that. Yeah.
I think that's probably going to endanger this prediction. I don't think there's any way ESPN. They'd be fine with 2 teams from the SEC. There's no way they're going to let the other half, though, be purely Big Ten.
So here's how I came up with this. From a personnel perspective, I think there are 3 teams that have separated themselves from everybody else, and that won't shock anybody. All right? Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. From a schedule perspective, I think then you have a next tier of teams that are a fairly consensus, remaining top 10. Michigan, Texas A&M, Clemson, etc. Amongst those teams, Michigan, I think, has clearly separated itself from a favorable schedule standpoint. And so here's my scenario when I ran this, is those top 4 teams all have 1 loss, and everybody else has 2 losses. So if Michigan wins at Ohio State, which I am predicting they do, to win the Big, and then ends up winning the Big Ten, they're obviously in. Mm-hmm. So then we get down to these 2 one-loss teams that did not win their conferences, in Ohio State and Georgia. All right, so Clemson won the ACC but has 2 losses. And Ohio State started the year by beating Notre Dame in my projection. Clemson loses at Notre Dame in my projection. I don't believe the committee will put 2-loss Clemson where they have a common opponent and Ohio State beat them and Clemson did not. I don't believe they'll put them in the playoff. And then you have Georgia, who I have, who plays Oregon at the beginning of the season. I've got Oregon being in the Pac-12 championship game. That would also be a better resume from a non-conference win standpoint than anything Clemson would bring to the table, and they're from the SEC and a much better conference, and they're the defending national champions. So that's why I came up with that scenario.
No, that's a rational thought process to put
politics
on this.
aren't rational, is
Exactly,
what you're saying.
yeah.
I hear you. All right, so let's put it back up there again. Here's the rest of where I have the Big Ten finishing. So I've got Michigan and Ohio State both making the playoff. The next highest rated Big Ten team, because I think it's a mishmash after that, I have Minnesota winning the Big Ten West. You'll see more on that here in a minute. Finishing 17th, that would put Minnesota in the Rose Bowl for the first time since 1962, 60 years. That's the longest drought of any charter member in the Big Ten. But you can see in my projection, it's really close. I've got Minnesota, Penn State, and Wisconsin all together. I've got Penn State beating Minnesota, but Minnesota beating Wisconsin, right? And so I'm not even sure how the committee then will go ahead and rectify that. And that's where I kind of played some politics, actually. I thought, you know what? Maybe that's where the committee says, you know what? Minnesota has not been to the Rose Bowl in 60 years. Let's put them there. Because remember, the committee decides who goes to the New Year's Six bowl games, right? So the Rose Bowl, in the year that it's not in the playoff, takes the highest rated Big Ten or Pac-10 team that's either the champion or is the champion that or the team that didn't make the playoff. And so I think it will be really close with those three. And then you can see Air Force, I have the highest rated Group of 5 team, which means I'm predicting that this will be the first time a service academy team is in a New Year's Six bowl. So your thoughts on where and later on in my power ratings, I've got pretty much everybody except the bottom 2 or 3 teams in the Big Ten in the top 50. I think the league is absolutely loaded this year. I just think between Ohio State's personnel and Michigan's schedule and personnel, I just think they've separated themselves from everybody else. But I still think everybody else is pretty good.
Yeah, what stands out to me obviously is Air Force. Just of all the rest of the teams outside of the Big Ten, and you made that prediction yesterday. That'll be an interesting season, I think, to watch for them. Texas and especially Wisconsin. A top 20 finish for most teams across the landscape of college football is a pretty good benchmark. You're a top 20 for Wisconsin. 20, especially after the last couple of seasons, it just seems kind of meh. Is that how you rated the temperature of the fan base?
Yeah. I mean, that's what we talked about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
This would be the first time since we went to a divisions and a championship game in our league that Wisconsin had missed the Big Ten championship game for 3 straight years. That's never happened before, but in my projection, I think that's going to happen this year. But they're at the same time, they're not bad, so nobody's really angry or fired up. You're just kind of meh.
Yeah. That's about it. Other than NC State finishing in the top 10, one of these things is not like the others.
Yeah, they have never finished a season in the top 10 of the AP poll in the history of that program.
Yeah.
All right, let's go through my predictions for the Power 5 conferences. And yes, I learned this trick from the guy that used to sit in your chair, my old partner, John Miller. I added up all the games to make sure the math worked out. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I have Miami winning the Coastal in the ACC over Pittsburgh and North Carolina, and then Clemson winning the Atlantic over NC State and Boston College, and it's really because NC State has to go to Clemson this year. And then I have Clemson beating Miami for the ACC championship. Any thoughts on how I have the ACC projected to finish?
Bounce back year for Clemson. I'm not totally sold on them quite yet, but it'll be again interesting to watch what happens to that team this year. Miami and Pittsburgh. I'm not really sure what to expect from Pittsburgh this year. I think with Pat Narduzzi, you're always going to have a decent defense, but I'm not really sure losing Kenny Pickett is going to be that easy to come back from. Mm-hmm. But the rest of this, Duke, obviously, hapless down there, 0-8 in conference. As you predicted yesterday, one of 2 teams in Power 5 to go 0-4 in their in their conference slate. So nothing really sticks out to me here in the ACC overall. Still not sold, like I said, on Clemson, but it'll be interesting to see what they're able to do.
I believe the best unit in the country is Clemson's defensive front. And I mean that in terms of the distance between them and what I would rank the second best unit in the country. All right. I mean, you can make an argument Ohio State's receivers, even with the guys they lost to the first round of the NFL draft, is the best unit in the country. But I don't think the distance between them and then the next best unit is what the distance is between Clemson and the next best defensive line. And in a league this is going to be one of the best quarterback leagues the big years the ACC's ever had. If you've got that defensive front, and you know this as a Pat Mahomes fan, if I don't have to blitz you and give you man coverage and I can pressure you coming off the edge with 4 guys, that is a huge advantage. And I do think Clemson brings that to the table this year.
And you're higher on Wake Forest, right, this season?
I'm a little bit lower than the market will be.
Okay.
Yeah, they're going to be a top 25 team in the AP poll after winning 11 games last year.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All right, let's go next over to the Big 12 Conference, where I think Oklahoma and Baylor, and boy, the schedules, I went round and around figuring this out with the schedules and because of the round robin, and I don't think any of these teams is a clear top 10 team heading into the year, but I still think Oklahoma will have the best quarterback in the league with Central Florida transfer Dylan Gabriel, and then you're bringing in Brent Venables, who's one of the best defensive coaches in the country, as your head coach. Baylor, I think, is the strongest along the line of scrimmage on both sides in the league, but they lose an awful lot at the skill positions and in the secondary. Pretty much everybody they had playing those positions last year got drafted in the NFL. Oklahoma State brings back a lot of people from the team that was a half a yard away from winning the Big 12 last year, but the guys that lost, like Malcolm Rodriguez and a few others, were big impact players for them. Still, Mike Gundy is a pretty solid head coach, and 9-3 is still a really good season. Texas I struggled with, man, because my numbers love Texas. So I pulled a Phil Steele and overruled my computer, okay? Because my numbers have Texas winning the Big 12 or playing for the championship. I've been burned by this so many times with them. I just couldn't do it. So I kind of split it in half. All right. And then I could not make hide nor hair out of Kansas State, West Virginia, Iowa State, TCU. I think Iowa State of that group has the best coach. I think West Virginia out of that group has the best quarterback. I think with the transfer of JT Daniels, I think Kansas State out of that group has maybe the best overall team. I didn't know what to think. So I could see those 4 teams actually just finishing with the same records, just assigned to different teams. They're kind of all the same team to me.
Who's Kansas's win?
In the Big 12?
Yep.
I'd have to go back and look at my projection, but I think it was TCU at home, because they've also, even in the years where they were primordial ooze, they played TCU very close. So I think that's their one win in the conference is against TCU.
Gotcha. Yeah, the rest of this makes sense to me anyway. Texas, I'm waiting for them to bust out. Maybe they will. Maybe they will. But it seems like Texas is this close away from becoming the next Nebraska. A has-been school with I shouldn't say has-been school, but basically living in the past, as a lot of Nebraska fans are prone to do, or at least the stereotype is. And I really believe if they don't get it turned around in the next couple of years, turned around top of the Big 12, vying for a playoff spot, which is going to be even harder to do once they move to the SEC, they're definitely in Nebraska territory.
All right, next conference we will take a look at is, of course, the home team here. Let's look at how I project the Big 10 to go. I think Michigan and Ohio State are both 8-1 in the league with 1 loss overall. I think Penn State will have a bounce-back season. I think it'll be an interesting start for them. I have them losing at Purdue in the opener and then going down and winning at Auburn in my projections there. I wasn't sure what to do with Michigan State because I think they're owed a level of respect after what Mel Tucker accomplished last year, but my numbers I did the opposite with them, Aaron, that I did with Texas, in that I overruled my numbers again, okay? Because my numbers told me bet the under 7.5 wins, or what my numbers told me. But I just have a lot of respect for what they did last year, and so I overruled and split the baby in half with them again and put them at 8-4. I think Maryland gets to a bowl game again. I think Indiana actually doubles last season's win total, but still only finishes 4-8. I think Rutgers' schedule is much harder than it was last year. In fact, in a couple of my simulations, I only had them going 3-9. In the West, this came down, even though Purdue is further down the list there because of tiebreakers, this actually came down to Minnesota and Purdue for me until the very minute I sent you this prediction. I went back and forth on this the entire time. My numbers have them rated virtually the same. They also have the more favorable schedules in this conference or in this division. Since we went to the East-West alignment in the Big Ten in 2014, Aaron, only one time has a team won this division when it had to play two of these three, Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. And that was Wisconsin in 2016 when they played all three of those teams, but they did so because they also played Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. So who doesn't play two of those three teams this year? Purdue and Minnesota. So now coincidentally, my numbers really liked those teams, and I really was won over personally by the way Purdue won that bowl game last year at Tennessee. I know it was quote
one
unquote
of the most exciting bowl games of last.
I know it was a neutral
season.
site, but that was a Tennessee home game, man. And Tennessee went all in to win that game, and they were playing without David Bell and George Karlaftis in that game. And they still won it. That I have to believe that's a huge springboard for them. I think they also have easily the best quarterback in this division in Aiden O'Connell as well. Okay, so I like a lot about them. In the end, though, I decided to go with the team that I think with losses up front will be tougher along the line of scrimmage. And my numbers have Minnesota with more fifth-year senior roster points than any team in the conference. That was my final, and I mean right before I hit send on the email, final tiebreaker between Minnesota and Purdue for who I have representing the West in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I think the biggest question marks for me, two from the East, two from the West, Penn State and Michigan State. Really not sure what to expect out of those teams. And then in the West, Wisconsin and Nebraska. Really don't have a feel for either of those teams, a strong feel anyway. And I guess you could maybe throw Purdue in there as well. But
you can see that I have Nebraska beating Oklahoma at home by this prediction. Yes.
Yeah. So I think it'll be, like you said, the cartilage game, if you will, kind of what separates the champions from kind of the rest and the chaff. As you said, in the West, if this comes through, is Minnesota and Purdue. And obviously in the East, that's the Ohio State-Michigan game. That's basically going to be the East Division championship this year if these predictions come through. I don't really foresee any team in the East throwing a wrench into Ohio State or Michigan. Do you think Penn State has that capability? Because I really don't see it, but
I don't, because they've recruited too well to continue to go 11-11. All right. And so I do think that there should be some form of a mental toughness edge for them. I think Sean Clifford, you go back and look at his numbers, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions last year, was not as terrible as the perception. Okay. I think they can have some form of a bounce back like Michigan did last year. Here's the thing, though, they don't have. And, they would have had it if Jahan Dotson had come back to school, but he didn't. They don't have that one Aiden Hutchinson player that takes a team that might really be an 8-4, 9-3 team and puts him on his back to make him a 10-2, 11-1 team because he's, putting up 15 sacks like Aiden did or 15 touchdowns like a Jahan Dotson would be capable of. That's the one thing. Tell me right now, there's a lot of very highly recruited players on Penn State's roster. Tell me who's the one guy on their team right now that you think could either lead the Big Ten in sacks or touchdowns.
I don't know.
And so I think because of that, I don't see that they could break into that duopoly there at the top. But I definitely think they have a better roster than the teams that are beneath them.
That makes sense. And Michigan over Minnesota, what is that, the Brown Jug game?
Yeah, and this might be the last time we see this Big Ten championship game alignment. Who knows what happens after this with the new TV contract. I would imagine Fox is not going to say, yeah, by all means, let's bring UCLA and USC in, and let's have Ohio State and Iowa or Michigan and Wisconsin for the Big Ten championship next year. No, they're going to want that to be Ohio State, USC, Penn State, UCLA, right? They're going to want to do everything they can to make that a possibility. So I don't know what'll happen with this divisional alignment. So this may be the last time we see this fall. In fact, it will be if I had to guess.
Yeah, sayonara.
All right, next is, well, the artist formerly known as the Pac-12. Who knows what it'll look like here when this is all said and done right now. And you can see I've got a pretty jumbled top there. I've got Utah and Oregon. Now, there are no divisions in the Pac. Well, there technically are, but they're not going by North, and they're just doing it for scheduling this year. The Pac-12 is going with the top 2 teams. So that's why I don't have this laid out North and South, but I have best records. I have Utah and Oregon both going 7-2 in the league. And then I have USC next at 6-3. So I've got Utah and Oregon playing for the Pac-12 championship. A team my numbers like more than I was willing to go in on is Oregon State. My numbers think Oregon and Oregon State at the end of the year in the Civil War could actually be for a bid in the Pac-12 championship game. Huh. I just couldn't quite get there. Okay, but that's how I have the Pac-12 laid out right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the teams that are worth like staying up until midnight for. I love the atmosphere at Arizona State. Pac-12 in general is a lot better when they're competitive. Looks like you're predicting a downturn for Arizona State this year. Yeah, USC and UCLA, obviously you want them to build some momentum, but you're not totally in necessarily with 9-3 is a good record for a first-year head coach in Lincoln Riley, but it seems like they should be able to compete for a championship right away with all of the talent.
Are. I've got them one game out.
Okay.
Yeah, they're one game away from playing for the Pac-12 championship. They don't have an easy schedule, all right? And USC, to their credit, almost never ducks anybody. But they've got they play at Utah, for example. They play at UCLA. They have Notre Dame in the non-conference. So they start off with Stanford, who really mollywopped them last year. They don't play an easy schedule, and they are still incorporating a lot of new pieces. Keep that in mind. But I also believe they have the most talented roster in this league. Yeah. Would I be surprised if they caught fire from the beginning and blitzkrieged this conference? No, I would not.
And Colorado, man alive. I kind of remember when Colorado was respectable. It seems like ever since they left the Big 12, kind of forgettable. I just don't. And now it sounds like they're not begging, but they've been one of the teams mentioned as coming back to the Big 12. I remember when they were respectable. I just don't know what it's going to take for them. I don't know what your recruiting pitch for Colorado is as well at this point.
So you can see I've got Utah in the Rose Bowl for the second consecutive season. So Kyle Whittingham is the Kirk Ferentz of the West Coast, man. He gets no run and has just done a tremendous job. All right, final conference we will look at, because we only do the Power 5, is the SEC. I have both Alabama and Georgia getting upset at some point during the regular season, but then meeting again for the SEC championship in Atlanta, and Alabama winning again. I've got Georgia winning the East Division, which is improving, though. I have them winning that division by 2 games. I have A&M kind of hanging around with Alabama most of the season, but really not really being in the race. I think Mississippi State is going to have a surprising season. I think they will be Georgia's only regular season loss. And I think that this will be the year that the Mike Leach hire pays off for them. LSU is a team I really had a hard time wrapping my mind around. I have it as a top 10 talent roster, but a lot of it is new pieces from the transfer portal. Similar to a USC situation with Lincoln Riley, where Brian Kelly's kind of rebuilding and reloading that roster on the fly. My power rating numbers really like Arkansas a lot, but when you look at their schedule, they're playing one of the toughest schedules in the United States. I mean, last year they had a team that shocked everybody and finished in the final top 25. This year's team could be better than that one and have a worse record with the kind of schedule that they are playing. So your thoughts on what I've got predicted for the SEC this fall?
The Alabama A&M game this year, Alabama, I'm just telling you right now, Alabama team total over.
No matter what it is.
If you like betting overs.
If it's 45, are you going over?
I'm going over on the 45, especially after getting upset last year at A&M, and then
They're now bidding them for players? How dare you do that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Between Jimbo and his old boss. That'll be an entertaining game. The rest of this, fairly predictable, seemingly, anymore with the SEC, Alabama and Georgia. Once more around the maypole we go. And Tennessee, I think that's a promising, if they ended up with a 9-3 record, I think for fans there, that's a pretty promising trajectory that they're on. Same for Kentucky as well, although we're kind of getting used to, I don't know about you, but I'm getting used to Kentucky being pretty competitive.
Is Mark Stoops, former Hawkeye, is he the Kirk Ferentz of the SEC?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the possibility. Elsewhere, nothing really standing out to me. LSU 8-4 in the old Brian Kelly's first season. If that may seem like a disappointment in that division, in that conference, I think that's a pretty good record for your first season.
Let's now go to my bowl projections. Based on how those predictions of those conferences turn out, these are what I believe will be the bowl projections, and we're not going to go through all of these. We'll look at the playoff. I think Georgia plays Alabama in Atlanta in the Peach Bowl, which is one of the national semifinals this year. And then I think you're looking at an Ohio State-Michigan rematch in the Fiesta Bowl in the other national semifinal. I can't even imagine what the hype would be if that actually happens, okay? I've got Oklahoma renewing a old conference rivalry that'll be a new one here in a couple of years against Texas A&M in the Sugar Bowl. Notre Dame and Clemson, I tried to get around having a rematch in this game. The problem that I had was that the Orange Bowl would not take NC State to play Clemson, obviously, when Notre Dame is on the board. And then I thought, would they take USC to play Clemson when Notre Dame is on the board? But USC fans don't travel really to any bowl game that isn't a Rose Bowl. So I ended up having a Notre Dame-Clemson rematch here in the Orange Bowl. In the Rose Bowl, I have Minnesota and Utah. And in the Cotton Bowl, the final New Year's Six bowl game, I've got Air Force against NC State. Apologies to whatever TV network has that one. TV executive losing their mind that's the game. And then you see the games for the Big Ten. I've got LSU, Penn State in the Citrus Bowl. The real Quest Bowl is the artist formerly known as the Outback Bowl. And I've got Michigan State versus Tennessee in that game. I've got Iowa, Arkansas in Nashville for the Music City Bowl. The Duke's Mayo Bowl will take the place of the Las Vegas Bowl in the rotation for the Big Ten this year. I've got North Carolina. That's basically a home game for them against Wisconsin. Pittsburgh versus Purdue out at Yankee Stadium.
That would be an interesting game.
I agree. That would be an interesting game. In the Pinstripe Bowl. And I think I've got...
there's at least one other.
I think is it the Quick Lane in there somewhere?
Yeah.
That I've got Maryland in the Quick Lane Bowl.
Yeah, Maryland, Toledo in the Quick Lane Bowl.
So those are what I think the Big Ten bowl projections will be. Comments on those or anything else that stands out to you?
The Ohio State-Michigan rematch in Arizona for the national semifinal, that would be...
Someone at the Arizona Chamber of Commerce is on their knees right now praying to Jobu to make that happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then at least we're not going to get another if this comes through, another all SEC national championship.
Right.
So there's the bright side of that, but it's the same figures in the last few years, basically in the college football playoff. Michigan is, second season in a row making the college football playoff. I tell you that 13 months ago. What do you tell me?
Dude, I said here last year, and one of my season win total best bets was Michigan under 7.5.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yep.
I'd have thought you were nuts, but here we are.
I think the Sugar Bowl would be one of the most entertaining bowl games. New Year's Six games, the old Big 12 matchup before they become
an SEC matchup. Yeah.
Let's see, Rose Bowl. I don't know.
What would the state of Minnesota do if they finally got to go to Pasadena?
Oh, they would all
empty
go.
Out.
Oh, yeah.
That's what they would do.
Yeah. Southern California compared to the Twin Cities. I would take that deal any day. I just don't know. This so much depends on how how the season or the path to getting there looks like. I just feel like this might be a moment for Minnesota where it's just the moment. The moment is too big, but still. Playing in a Rose Bowl is a big deal. The rest of this, nothing is really standing out. Real Quest Bowl, Michigan State versus Tennessee. If Michigan State still is pretty respectable this year, that could be a really cool game, a really interesting game. I just have no idea.
Good uniform contrast there with the bright green and the bright orange. Yeah.
What's a Real Quest?
I have no idea. They actually just signed this endorsement deal a week ago. I have no idea. It was just going to be the Tampa Bowl.
That's better.
Yeah, but that is better than Real Quest. I agree. Yeah, as opposed, you know what Real Quest is better than? Fake Quest.
Yeah.
If it was the Fake Quest Bowl, no one would want to play there. But I guess I don't know if you get Bloomin' Onions at the Real Quest Bowl or not. I'm guessing. Maybe you get a flash drive or something. I don't know what that entails.
Yeah, no, that's disappointing. But it some of these matchups. I think TV executives would like them, notwithstanding the NC State Air Force game, but those would be some fun and I think pretty balanced bowl games, a lot of those.
All right, real quick, let's finish up here. Phil Steele's college football preview has come out, and I like to do a look at all I really care about Phil's magazine because I can't read most of it. God bless him. I love the guy, but it is written in sans serif 6-point font, okay? But I love the articles at the beginning with his handicapper trend lines. That to me is worth the entire $20 for the magazine just by itself, all right?
Yep.
So looking at these trend lines based on some of his handicapping metrics, let's run down what he's got to say about some of the Big Ten teams. He thinks because of a tougher schedule, there is an 85% chance, according to his metrics, that Rutgers will have the same or worse record than last season. Because of a weaker strength of schedule, Phil thinks there's an 82% chance both Nebraska and Wisconsin will have the same or better records than last season. In his beloved turnovers equal turnaround metric, that's kind of what made Phil's career was this stat. He says Indiana is due for a make good on that front. Meanwhile, Iowa is due for regression to the mean. But I think Iowa's been in this section like 3 years in a row and it hasn't mattered. Okay, Iowa's been overdue for a regression for the mean on turnovers for like a decade. All right, I don't think it's coming. Phil lists Indiana as his number one bull market team, meaning team to buy low on. So you're also in these things looking if teams get multiple positive or negative listings. That's what you're looking for, as opposed to just outliers. He has Michigan and Michigan State both in his bear market teams to sell on, but he also projects Michigan to finish number 5 in the country. So there's that. Now Phil admits he had his worst year ever predicting surprise teams last season, as did I, probably for the same reason. Relied too much on the data out of the COVID year. So you got to think that Phil is probably due for a rebound. He has Penn State at number 8 and Wisconsin at number 11 in his surprise teams ranking. But on his list of the most improved teams, Nebraska is rated number 4. Here's where the Big Ten ranks in his preseason. This is just power ratings from a handicapping standpoint. Ohio State 2, Michigan 5, Wisconsin 12, Iowa 17, Penn State 18, 29, Minnesota 31, Michigan State. See, his numbers are saying the same thing mine are, that they're not as high in Michigan State. 34, Nebraska. That's the exact same power rating that I ended up giving Nebraska. 41, Maryland. That's the exact same power rating that I gave to Maryland. He's lower power rated on Purdue than I am. Indiana at 67, Northwestern 71, Illinois 74, and Rutgers at 83. Phil projects Ohio State versus Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. All right, so what do you think about what Phil Steele has laid out from some of his trends and angles where the Big Ten is concerned here?
Yeah, when you look at Indiana, and we'll get into this in a little bit as well. A tip for you: it's really tempting to just WNL. So where's the wins when you're trying to predict win totals? I think sometimes a better way to look at it is where do you find the for sure losses?
That's a great point.
For sure losses, and I'll explain that.
Especially as teams reinvent themselves every year.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So so what he's saying about Indiana definitely rings true there, especially when you see their win total, which again we'll get into in a little bit as well. Going back to the power ranking, it's basically what I expected it to be when you line up the Big Ten here. I can't really argue with Wisconsin and Iowa being the 3 and 4 teams. I don't see much hype. Both of the teams have the same problem. They just don't know what they are at quarterback. They seem to have okay pieces around them, especially on defense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably why they're ranked that high. And I said before, Penn State and Michigan State, 2 teams I have the biggest question marks just because I don't know who they are. I don't know if they know who they are going into the season as well. He's got them in the top half of the league. So nothing super surprising in his rankings. He is a little bit higher on Iowa than even I am, seemingly. Kind of a mixed bag when it comes to Iowa for all the Hawkeye fans listening in, but yeah, the rest of this, it's a fairly predictable power rating.
So I didn't give out my power rating. Leave that up there for a second because that's proprietary. I like to keep to myself for market purposes. But off the top of my head, I will go through here really quickly, team by team, and see where he has Ohio State exactly where I do. He has Michigan exactly where I do. He has Wisconsin about 10 spots higher than I do. He's got Iowa about 5 or 6 spots higher than I do. He's got Penn State almost exactly where I do. He's got Minnesota a few spots lower than I do. He's got Michigan State at the exact number I do. He has Nebraska at the exact number I do. He has Maryland at the exact number I do. He's about 15 spots lower than Purdue on me. Indiana is roughly maybe I think about 5 or 6 spots higher than me. Northwestern's about right. Illinois is about right. And Rutgers is about right.
Yeah, I would agree on. I think a few spots.
So we
lower.
really disagree on Purdue. Him and I do.
Yeah, and for the upper echelon there, I would go with probably just off the top of my head where you have Iowa and Wisconsin and Penn State ranked. So that'll be interesting for sure.
Finally, since we're still talking about expansion and what will Notre Dame do. Here's another reminder of what's been driving all of this realignment for the last decade or so. All right. And here's why no one ever talks about basketball and why Kansas, despite just winning another national championship in basketball, is, sweating bullets over there in Lawrence. The most watched college basketball game last regular season, Aaron, was Coach K's final game, and it was at Cameron versus North Carolina. That's the biggest rivalry in the sport, okay? It drew in 3.98 million viewers. That was the most watched game the entire college basketball season during the regular season. Last year, Aaron, 40 regular season college football games had more viewers. 40. You also have to consider how many fewer football games there are to basketball games.
Yeah.
All right. 40 regular season college football games had more viewers than the most watched college basketball game last season. That's why they don't ever ask about basketball when it comes to college sports realignment.
Yeah, and it's not, some people have theorized that, the research money that's available to Big Ten schools is secretly going to be the reason why some schools jump ship from their own conferences.
Right. The Big Ten's going to take Duke. No. With a crap football program because of research dollars, right?
No. It's all the eyeballs, and what that represents. And so this paradigm is slowly morphing into or away from market size as well. Slowly, I think this is. I don't know about you, Steve. I think this is the last cycle we will ever see where market size is even a remote consideration. And that has some implications, especially if you're a fan of schools that really...
So brands more than markets, basically.
Precisely, yeah. So as soon as Amazon makes their big play for one of these conferences, maybe it's the Big 12, maybe it's the Pac-10 or whatever they are now, as soon as Amazon or one of the streaming services makes their big play, that's forever going to reshape. This is going to be the last cycle I think we ever see where the market sizes actually matter. All it's going to be is brands, and the implication, if your brand, even if it's a strong brands don't mean large brands. If it is a strong brand but it's not a large brand, you could be on the shopping block someday as well.
All right, we'll come back, play our weekly game of Would You Rather here in just a moment. And now it is time, Aaron, to play Would You Rather, and I will ask you first. Would you rather the Big Ten add more teams now or wait to expand until Notre Dame decides?
I think the smart thing to do is wait to expand until Notre Dame decides. There's no benefit to you expanding right now before Notre Dame. I think once Notre Dame comes, the slice of the pie grows bigger, or the volume, the total pie grows bigger, and then your slice of that pie obviously is bigger as well once Notre Dame, in terms of money. It grows once Notre Dame jumps aboard. I'm growing less and less enamored with the prospect that I laid out last week of Washington, Stanford, Oregon. Yes, it would be cool to have a regional tie for USC and UCLA, but other than that, it makes zero financial sense whatsoever. San Francisco, really, really big college sports town out there, because Stanford's around. It is in Northern California. So, I would wait. I would wait until Notre Dame makes their move. There's really no school, not even really Miami. There's no school that really moves the needle like Notre Dame will.
Okay.
Next one is for you. Would you rather take Nebraska minus 12.5 or over 51 versus Northwestern in Dublin?
I would rather take Nebraska minus 12.5. I think Northwestern is going to play a lot of unders this year. I think I still don't see a threat on the outside. I still see very pedestrian quarterback play. I do like their tailbacks, and I do think they have a good offensive line. I think Pete Skoronski could end up being the first offensive lineman chosen in next spring's NFL draft. And so you can see where this is going with Pat Fitzgerald. Their defense, even in years where they were bad, they didn't play defense as bad as they did last year. They let go of the rope on defense last year. So you can probably guess where Pat Fitzgerald's going to go with this. We're just going to try to hit everybody with an ugly stick every week, right? So unders is what I would be looking at in Northwestern games, particularly when they start getting into the 50s. I would much rather play Nebraska minus 12.5, where maybe it is a 24-17 kind of a game. And then at the end, Nebraska tacks one on 31-17 with superior depth and covers. I would rather be sweating that out at the end than trying to get over 51 with that Northwestern offense.
Especially in an international game.
Right. First game of the year, all that kind of stuff. The defense ahead of the offense, you bet. All right, would you rather, speaking of the Huskers, Aaron, would you rather bet Nebraska 7 or Indiana 3.5 over its win total for this football season? Which of those overs would you rather bet?
Indiana. I think it's a lot harder to find 9 losses on Indiana's schedule than it is to find 6 on Nebraska's.
Good way of looking at it.
So,
I don't think Cincinnati on the road is a guaranteed loss for Indiana even.
I think I would be, in some ways, I'd be a little bit more worried about Western Kentucky for Indiana this year than Cincinnati. But I don't think that's an automatic loss. I don't think Illinois is an automatic loss. So, you could hit this conceivably in the first 4 weeks of this season.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to go 4-0.
And then maybe not win one or two more games
Rutgers,
the rest of the time.
Yeah, they also play Rutgers. They're not dog doo-doo. So it's really hard for me to find 9 losses on that schedule. Final one is for you. Would you rather go back to the way things were 20 years ago, speaking about college football, or become the college football czar right now in this climate?
I would rather become the college football czar right now. Because, and this is something I've heard Rick Neuheisel say on SiriusXM, and I completely agree. What's going on right now is everybody is making decisions on the basis of what's best for them and their agenda.
Yeah.
And that's their job. Kevin Warren is the Big Ten commissioner. He's not college football commissioner. He's not Pac-12 commissioner. Greg Sankey is the SEC commissioner. He's not Big 12 commissioner. He's not college football commissioner. Who in college football right now is making decisions on the basis of what's best for the sport and for the athletes that play it overall? And the answer is no one is. Okay? And so, I'd like to put on the Infinity Gauntlet like Thanos and say, fine, I'll do it myself. All right. So I would prefer to be the commissioner, because there's things that we can't do like we did 20 years ago. I miss the days of the 9 bowl games on New Year's Day, and you didn't know who was going to win the national championship. We can't go back to that. I understand. It's a playoff-driven world now. We have to recognize that. You also can't go back to the financial models. I mean, we can't have the Big Ten signing billion-dollar-a-year TV deals and still offering, remuneration to the athletes like it's 1987, okay? So there's things we have to update for sure, but the first thing we got to update, Aaron, is someone ultimately has to make decisions where even if they're not perfect and they're not always right, the motivation is what's actually best for the overall sport.
Yeah, imagine if in the NFL you didn't have a commissioner, instead you had 32 owners.
Right, great point, yeah.
And the owner of...
the Cowboys.
Let's say, the owner of the Cowboys, I'm tired of subsidizing the Green Bay Packers. No, I'm tired of subsidizing the Las Vegas Raiders. Las Vegas Raiders. I'm tired of subsidizing the Kansas City Chiefs,
the Detroit Lions, the Cincinnati Bengals. Yeah.
I'm going to form an alliance with these teams over here to force them out, or to do that. That type of stuff would happen if there wasn't a strong centralized authority in the NFL. You bet your sweet bippy that kind of poop would happen all the time. So, I wish we could go back to the way things were a little bit, but in this world, you got to have some sort of governance that's not the NCAA over college football. It's just too big of an entity to not have that. Too much at stake to not have that. And the entire ecosystem of college football down to the D2, D3 level, I mean, kind of the ripple effects will go down there as well. And I don't think that's a good thing for the sport.
All right, we'll come back. We'll wrap it up with feedback of the week and Twitter poll results right after this. This week's Twitter poll results, if you had a vote in the Big Ten media poll, which team would you pick to win the 2022 Big Ten football championship? 70% voted for Ohio State. It's like last year didn't even happen. 17.9% said Iowa, 10% said Michigan, 1.9% said Wisconsin. There's no way that Ohio State should be considered that big of a favorite, especially over Michigan, if anybody else.
There's
but
no
I agree
way
they should be the
Wisconsin
favorite.
Be that small of a favorite either.
You're right, because then they don't have to play Ohio State in the regular season, for example, like a Michigan does, right?
So I would have had Ohio State. I understand why Ohio
Actually,
State
do play in the regular season this year. I meant they don't have to go through them to win the division is what I meant,
I understand why people voted for Ohio State for sure. I just still have way too many questions on defense to be that confident. I would have had Ohio State 1, maybe. Michigan a really close 2. Wisconsin, and then spacebar, Wisconsin, spacebar, Iowa. If I was voting this.
Yeah, I would give Michigan more in the lines of like 30 to 40% odds than 10. Let's get to the feedback of the week. Jerry Godowski writes, was Nebraska the greatest 3-9 team in college football history last season?
It's funny, but yeah.
And it is funny, but when you look at the analytics, I mean, I've never seen stuff like this.
Yeah.
Like averaged 6 yards per play. Went 3-9. I mean, you got to go out of your way to try to lose games. And that's why when the win totals came out and they were 7 and everybody's like, whoa, that's way too much. That's why. Because the guys in Vegas are scared to death. They'll put a 5 out there. They'll get killed by everybody betting the over because of regression in the mean. So they put a 7 out there because they know that some of those breaks, don't you think eventually, the problem is we've been having this conversation about Nebraska for 3. It's like Iowa turnovers. You keep, this is the year Iowa's having a minus 13 turnover margin. You keep waiting for it, right? It just never happens. This is 3 years in a row we've been like, there's no way these things can go against Nebraska this year. There has to be a reverb, and it hasn't happened. They have lost more one-score games in the last 4 years than any program in the history of FBS college football in a 4-year span.
It's an amazing, amazing accomplishment. It's just not a good one.
Not a good one, indeed. All right, that's going to do it for this week's Bigger Ten. As Aaron said, we are off next week, but then we are back with a vengeance in 2 weeks for Big Ten Football Media Days. We'll have a full breakdown when that happens, but we left you with a longer episode and plenty of content, so you've got some extra time to digest. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, follow, 5-star review, whichever applies, however and wherever you watch, like here on YouTube or listen like here on iTunes. Please keep doing those things and keep helping us find more Big Ten sports fans just like you, and follow us on Twitter as well to keep up to date in between episodes at Bigger10 on Twitter. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Dace. We'll see you next time right here on Bigger 10.